August 6, 1945, 2:45 a.m., Tinian Island, North Pacific. Colonel Paul Tibbets climbed into the left seat of a Boeing B-29 Superfortress, modified beyond its designer's imagination. Behind him, ground crews loaded a weapon weighing 9,700 pounds, containing 141 pounds of uranium, 235 enriched to 80% purity. The bomb, Little Boy, represented 3 years of work by 130,000 people, cost nearly $2 billion, and possessed explosive power equivalent to 26 million pounds of conventional explosives. Tibbets was 30 years old. He'd flown combat over Europe and North Africa, tested the B-29 through dangerous development, and spent the last year training for a mission so secret most of his crew didn't know their weapon until hours before takeoff. Now, 1,500 miles from Japan, he was preparing to fly a mission that would either end the war or fail spectacularly. Before engine start, Flight Surgeon Don Young handed Tibbets 12 cyanide capsules, one for each crew member. If they crashed in Japan, capture meant interrogation, torture, execution. The capsules offered a faster exit. Tibbets accepted without comment, distributed them to his crew, then turned to the pre-flight checklist. 4 Wright R-3350 engines, 200 horsepower each, 141-foot wingspan, 135,000 pounds loaded weight, 30,000-foot ceiling, 3,250-mile range. The B-29 was the most advanced bomber ever built, and this aircraft, serial number 44-86292, had been hand-selected, stripped of defensive armament except tail guns, equipped with specialized instrumentation for a blast no human had witnessed in combat. 2 days earlier, Tibbets ordered the aircraft's name painted on its nose, Enola Gay, after his mother. The regularly assigned commander, Captain Robert Lewis, arrived that morning to discover his bomber bearing another woman's name. Lewis was furious, but this was Tibbets' mission, his responsibility, his place in history. What Lewis didn't grasp yet was that the man in the left seat wasn't flying another bombing mission. Paul Tibbets was about to prove that a single aircraft carrying a single bomb could accomplish what thousands of bombers had failed to achieve. Force Japan's unconditional surrender and end a war that killed 60 million people. In 6 hours and 15 minutes, the world would change forever. The Manhattan Project operated across multiple secret facilities on a scale defying comprehension. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, processed uranium using techniques requiring more electrical power than entire cities consumed. Hanford, Washington operated plutonium reactors cooled by the Columbia River. Los Alamos, New Mexico, hosted the weapons design laboratory where physicists turned theory into functional bombs. The challenge wasn't just building an atomic bomb, it was enriching uranium-235 to critical mass. Natural uranium contains only 0.7% U-235. Separating isotopes that differ by 3 neutrons and are chemically identical required technology that didn't exist when the project began. The K-25 plant at Oak Ridge processed uranium hexafluoride through 4,000 separation stages, consuming 1/7 of all U.S. electrical power during peak operations. By summer 1945, they'd produced enough weapons-grade uranium for 1 bomb, now loaded in the Enola Gay's bay. Little Boy's design was deceptively simple. A conventional explosive would fire a uranium projectile down a gun barrel at 1,000 feet per second into a uranium target. The combined mass would exceed critical mass, initiating exponential fission. In theory. The terrible truth, nobody knew with certainty Little Boy would work. Unlike the plutonium bomb tested at Trinity on July 16th, the uranium bomb had never been tested. Testing would consume the only available weapons-grade uranium. Physicists calculated an 80% probability of significant yield, 20% chance of failure, 20% chance the most expensive weapon ever built would fizzle, 20% chance Tibbets would drop it, watch it fail, and face Japanese defenders. 20% chance the invasion would proceed, with casualty estimates of 1 million American dead and wounded becoming reality. But calculations showed promise. When uranium masses combined, approximately 1.38% would undergo fission before blowing itself apart. That 1.38% would release 15 kilotons, temperatures exceeding the sun's surface, thermal radiation igniting everything within a mile, pressure waves flattening buildings, radiation killing thousands in subsequent weeks. General Leslie Groves selected Hiroshima for specific reasons: major military hub hosting 2nd Army headquarters, port facilities supporting logistics and troop movements, and crucially deliberately excluded from conventional bombing so they could assess atomic power without confusion from previous damage. That morning, Hiroshima's 340,000 civilians and 43,000 military personnel went about their routines, eating breakfast, preparing for work, sending children to school, unaware their city had been selected for annihilation. Paul Tibbets was born February 23, 1915, in Quincy, Illinois. His mother hoped he'd become a doctor. Instead, he fell in love with flying. He entered the Army Air Corps in 1937, earned his wings in 1938, and by 1942 had distinguished himself as one of the most skilled bomber pilots in service. Tibbets flew early B-17 combat missions over Europe, leading the 97th Bombardment Group through North Africa. General Eisenhower selected him to fly critical meetings, a vote of confidence in the young pilot's skill and reliability. But his B-29 test work brought him to Manhattan Project attention. Boeing's program was plagued with problems: engine fires, structural failures, mechanical difficulties killing test pilots. Tibbets helped resolve critical issues, earning a reputation as a pilot understanding both flying and engineering. In September 1944, Colonel Tibbets received orders changing his life: report to Colorado Springs for a meeting about an unexplained assignment. There he learned about the Manhattan Project and the requirement for a unit delivering atomic weapons against Japan. Mission specifications were extraordinary: aircraft at maximum altitude to minimize blast effects, bomb release at 31,000 feet, requiring precise navigation. Immediately after release, execute a 155-degree diving turn at maximum speed to escape the blast radius. Crew wearing protective goggles against thermal radiation brighter than 1,000 suns. Entire mission in radio silence. Tibbets accepted and assembled the 509th Composite Group, selecting crews for flying skill, ability to follow orders without questions, reliability under pressure, and security consciousness. Training began at Wendover Field, Utah, remote enough to practice without attention. The training was repetitive and peculiar. Mission after mission, dropping single large bombs from altitude, then violent evasive maneuvers, navigation across vast water, night flying, weather, radio silence, precision bombing. They became the most highly trained bomber crews in the air forces. Only Tibbets and senior officers knew the weapon. Others were told they'd drop a bomb so powerful one aircraft could destroy a city, but the mechanism remained classified. By May 1945, the 509th deployed to Tinian. From there, B-29s could reach any Japanese target. The island had become the world's largest air base. Multiple runways, massive hardstands, fuel storage, ammunition dumps, maintenance facilities rivaling major American cities. The 509th's area was segregated. Armed guards, strange bulbous bombs handled only by specialized crews. Silver B-29s, stripped of armament bearing distinctive markings, became objects of speculation and mockery. Other groups mocked them. Tibbets' private air force, cowards avoiding real missions. What they didn't know? The 509th rehearsed the war's most important mission. Every practice drop refined technique. Every navigation exercise improved aim point finding. Every evasive maneuver practiced the turn that might save their lives. By early August, the 509th was ready. The Enola Gay lifted off at 2:45 a.m. Tibbets held brakes, advanced throttles to full power, released and accelerated down 8,500 feet. Nose wheel lifted at 120 minutes. At 1:55 p.m, main gear left the runway with less than 200 feet remaining. Tibbets held level in ground effect, building speed before climbing. Captain Robert Lewis handled communications. Navigator Dutch Van Kirk plotted course. Bombardier Thomas Farabee prepared his Norden bombsight. Weaponeer Captain William Parsons and Lieutenant Morris Jepson had the terrifying responsibility of arming Little Boy during flight, never attempted before because nobody wanted an armed atomic bomb on an airfield. 2 additional B-29s accompanied them. The great artiste carried instrumentation. Necessary Evil carried cameras. 3 weather scouts departed earlier. The 6-hour flight to Japan began tense, then routine took over. At 4:55 a.m., Parsons and Jepson moved to the bomb bay. Working in cramped, unheated space, they removed safety devices, connected systems, armed conventional explosives. One mistake could destroy the aircraft. By 6:07 a.m., Little Boy was armed. Weather reports came from scouts ahead. Hiroshima, clear. Kokura, some clouds. Nagasaki, partially obscured. Tibbets confirmed. Proceed to Hiroshima. Japanese radar detected approaching aircraft but didn't react. Small B-29 formations had flown reconnaissance throughout July, not high-priority threats. 3 B-29s? Not worth precious fuel to intercept. This assumption killed 80,000 people instantly. At 8:09 a.m. local time, Tibbets began his bomb run. He climbed to 31,000 feet, leveled at 328 mph, turned control to Farabee. The Enola Gay flew straight and level, tracking toward the Ioi Bridge, a distinctive T-shaped structure. Farabee hunched over his Norden bomb sight, making final adjustments. He'd become one of the Army Air Force's most skilled bombardiers. Now he'd drop history's most important bomb on a city visible through broken clouds. At 8:15 a.m. and 17 seconds, bomb bay doors opened. Farabee pressed release. Little Boy fell away, fins stabilizing, trajectory bringing it to detonation altitude 43 seconds later. Tibbets immediately rolled into violent 155-degree diving turn, maximum bank, 4.5 Gs. Purpose, get as far as possible before detonation. At their speed, nearly 2.5 miles in 43 seconds. Nobody knew if it was enough. Tail gunner George Caron watched Little Boy fall, counting seconds, waiting for the flash scientists warned would be brighter than anything they'd seen. Below, a few people noticed the aircraft. Some pointed. Anti-aircraft batteries tracked but didn't fire. Ammunition too precious. Air raid sirens were silent. Just another reconnaissance flight. That assumption killed 80,000 instantly. At 8:16 a.m., 43 seconds after release, Little Boy detonated 1,968 feet above Hiroshima, 550 feet from the aim point, less than 1% error from 31,000 feet. For 1/10 of a millionth of a second, uranium underwent rapid fission. Roughly 1.4 pounds released energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The fireball expanded at millions of miles per hour, reaching 1,200 feet diameter within 1 second. Center temperatures exceeded 1 million degrees Celsius, hotter than the sun's core. Everything within 1,000 feet vaporized instantly. Human beings, buildings, vehicles, trees, reduced to atomic particles. The thermal pulse radiated at light speed. Everything combustible within a mile ignited. Wooden buildings burst into flames. People burned so severely their skin sloughed off in sheets. Those looking up were blinded permanently. Shadows burned into concrete where people blocked radiation, permanent silhouettes etched in stone. The pressure wave followed milliseconds later. Supersonic shock wave representing pressures exceeding 20 psi near hypocenter, pulverizing reinforced concrete, folding steel beams. Wooden buildings within a mile exploded into splinters and projectiles. People thrown hundreds of feet, those near windows shredded by glass fragments at hundreds of miles per hour. Those in buildings crushed or impaled by debris. The lucky died instantly. The unlucky survived initial blast, but were trapped in burning wreckage with injuries bringing slow, agonizing death. 9 seconds after detonation, the shock wave reached the Enola Gay, now 11.5 miles away. Despite completing the diving turn and accelerating at maximum speed, the blast caught them. The aircraft lurched violently. Instruments shook. Airframe groaned. For a terrifying moment, Tibbets thought they'd been hit. Then the second shock wave, pressure wave reflecting off ground, another violent lurch, then stabilization. They were clear. They'd survived. Behind them, Hiroshima was dying. Karen watched the mushroom cloud form through darkened goggles. Brilliant white fireball, painful even through protection. Then boiling column of smoke, fire, vaporized material rising hundreds of miles per hour. The mushroom shape formed at 30,000 feet, continued to 40,000, then 50,000 feet. The cloud was violet, purple, red, orange, white, colors that shouldn't exist together. It roiled with convection powered by heat melting steel and vaporizing concrete. At its base, a ring of fire marked where thermal radiation still ignited everything it touched. Karen's voice shook over intercom. "My God, what have we done?" Nobody answered. The crew processed what they'd witnessed, a single bomb creating destruction previously requiring hundreds of bombers and thousands of tons. Tibbets broke silence. "Fellows, you have just dropped the first atomic bomb in history." When the Enola Gay landed at 2:58 p.m., over 200 personnel had gathered. General Carl Spaatz pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Tibbets' flight suit while engines still ran. The mission succeeded beyond expectations. Little Boy functioned as designed. Yield matched predictions. Target hit with precision. Crew survived without injury, but real results emerged through reconnaissance and radio intercepts. Hiroshima was effectively destroyed, approximately 80,000 dead or dying from immediate effects. Another 60,000 would die in following weeks from radiation sickness, burns, injuries, and collapsed medical infrastructure in a city where 90% of medical personnel were killed. Physical destruction was comprehensive. Of 76,000 buildings, 70,000 destroyed or severely damaged, everything within 1 mile completely obliterated. Buildings up to 2 miles heavily damaged or burned. Only reinforced concrete remained standing, gutted by fires burning for days. The fires were devastating. Thermal pulse ignited thousands of simultaneous fires. With broken water mains, destroyed equipment, and dead firefighters, fires merged into conflagration, burning until nothing remained. Human suffering defied description. Survivors, Hibakusha, described horrors haunting them for life. People with skin hanging in sheets, children crying for vaporized parents, bodies so burned they couldn't be identified. Mass graves for thousands buried without names. Radiation effects were insidious. People seemingly unharmed began dying days later from acute radiation syndrome. Hair fell out. Uncontrollable bleeding, collapsed immune systems, deaths from infections. Healthy bodies would fight. Surviving medical personnel had no understanding of radiation sickness, but from purely military perspective, the mission achieved its objective. Japan's government, receiving reports of destruction by single bomb, faced impossible calculation. If America possessed multiple atomic bombs, Japanese intelligence couldn't determine how many. Then Japan's strategy of inflicting unacceptable invasion casualties was obsolete. Americans could destroy cities one at a time from high altitude without risking ground troops. On August 9th, 3 days after Hiroshima, Major Charles Sweeney flew Boxcar to drop the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Fat Man, using plutonium implosion design, reached 21 kilotons. Approximately 40,000 died immediately, total casualties eventually exceeding 70,000. Japan's military leadership, even after 2 atomic bombings, wanted to continue fighting. They argued Americans couldn't have many atomic bombs, that Japan could endure. That honor demanded fighting to the last man, but Emperor Hirohito intervened directly. On August 15th, he made a radio address, first time most Japanese heard their emperor's voice, announcing surrender. The war was over. After 6 years killing 60 million people, devastating continents, consuming industrial output of nations, the most destructive conflict in history ended because one pilot flew one mission carrying one bomb, demonstrating that further resistance was suicide. Colonel Paul Tibbets never publicly expressed regret. In numerous interviews over his long life, he died in 2007 at age 92, he consistently stated he'd done his duty, followed orders, potentially saved hundreds of thousands of American lives lost invading Japan. He pointed to Operation Downfall casualty estimates, 1 million American casualties, multiple millions of Japanese deaths. Fighting on Okinawa, where Japanese defenders fought virtually to the last man and civilian casualties exceeded $100,000, provided grim preview. "I knew when we took off that morning we were going to kill people," Tibbets said in 1975. "That's what war is. You kill the enemy before he kills you. The atomic bomb did it faster and more efficiently than conventional weapons, but the outcome was the same. Japan was defeated, and American soldiers who would have died invading those islands came home to their families instead. I slept fine every night knowing that." But others struggled more. Van Kirk expressed ambivalence, acknowledging necessity but troubled by civilian casualties. Radio operator Nelson rarely discussed the mission. Farabee defended the decision but admitted the mushroom cloud haunted his dreams. Robert Lewis wrote in his personal log immediately after, "My God, what have we done?" This sentence captured moral complexity, defining nuclear weapons debates for generations. The scientific community was similarly divided. Oppenheimer later expressed profound ambivalence, famously quoting the Bhagavad Gita after Trinity. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Others, like Teller, remained convinced nuclear weapons were necessary deterrents, preventing larger conflicts. The strategic impact extended far beyond ending World War II. Demonstration that one bomber could destroy a city fundamentally changed military planning, international relations, geopolitical strategy. Atomic bombs made conventional superiority partially obsolete. This logic drove the Cold War arms race. The bomber itself became one of history's most famous and controversial aircraft. After serving in atomic testing at Bikini Atoll, it returned to the United States and eventually storage. For decades, it remained in pieces while historians, veterans, and peace activists debated how it should be displayed. The Smithsonian's planned 1995 exhibition sparked intense controversy. Initial script emphasized Japanese civilian casualties and questioned necessity. Veterans erupted in fury. The exhibition was cancelled, the director resigned, and the Enola Gay was displayed with minimal interpretive text. Today, the fully restored Enola Gay sits in the Smithsonian's Udvar Hazy Center. Visitors walk beneath its wingspan, see the bomb bay where little boy loaded, read factual plaques without moral editorializing. The aircraft remains what it was. August 6, 1945, a symbol of American industrial might, technological innovation, and modern warfare's devastating power. The numbers tell part of the story. 1 aircraft, 12 crew, 1 bomb, 6 hours 15 minutes, 15 kilotons, 80,000 immediate casualties, hundreds of thousands more dead from radiation, burns, injuries. A war ended that killed 60 million worldwide. But real legacy extends beyond statistics. The Enola Gay's flight proved concepts shaping warfare for generations. Strategic bombing could achieve decisive results without invasion. Technology could provide overwhelming advantages against numerically superior opponents. Moral calculations of warfare had entered new territory. Previous campaigns killed comparable numbers, but atomic bombs concentrated destruction into single events, making moral responsibility immediate and identifiable. Deterrence through fear of retaliation became viable strategy. The B-29 Superfortress represented American industrial capacity at its peak. Boeing produced 3,970 B-29s, averaging nearly 3 daily during peak production. Each required 55,000 parts, 600,000 rivets, 16,000 man-hours. But the B-29 was more than engineering. It symbolized American technological optimism that engineering and industrial capacity could solve any problem. Paul Tibbets embodied this approach. Technical proficiency, systematic training, industrial support, absolute confidence in American technological superiority. He wasn't the best pilot by conventional measures, but was selected because he combined flying skill with engineering understanding, leadership with security consciousness, and mental toughness to carry the weight of killing hundreds of thousands with a single decision. When Tibbets died in 2007, he requested no funeral, no headstone. He feared any grave would become protest target. Instead, his ashes scattered over the English Channel he'd flown over during 1942 combat. He left a legacy impossible to summarize simply: hero to some, mass murderer to others, and to most, a complicated figure who did what his nation asked in circumstances so extreme that moral certainty becomes impossible. The haunting question: was atomic bombing necessary? Historians debate this 8 decades later without consensus. Some argue Japan was already defeated. Cities destroyed by conventional bombing, navy sunk, air force grounded by fuel shortages, populations starving from blockade. Japan would have surrendered given time. Others counter that time meant months of continued fighting, more conventional bombing, more starvation deaths, more executed Allied prisoners. Japanese military prepared for national suicide, arming civilians with bamboo spears, training children to attack tanks with explosives, planning to kill all prisoners when invasion began. Atomic bombs provided Hirohito justification to override his military, framing capitulation as necessary to prevent extinction rather than shameful defeat. What remains undeniable: atomic bombs ended the war in days. Whether morally justified, militarily necessary, or strategically optimal can be debated endlessly. But effectiveness was absolute. Colonel Paul Tibbets, waking August 6, 1945, couldn't know his mission would succeed. He only knew his orders: deliver a weapon his nation spent 3 years and $2 billion developing, That failure might mean invasion and millions of casualties, that success might end history's most destructive war. He climbed into the Enola Gay, carrying not just a bomb, but hopes of every American soldier waiting to invade, every prisoner praying for liberation, every parent hoping their son would come home. He carried weight of 130,000 Manhattan Project workers. He carried expectations of military leaders who'd promised President Truman atomic bombs could force surrender. And he carried responsibility for what his weapon would do to hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians waking with no idea their city had been selected for annihilation. The Enola Gay took off at 2:45 a.m. It returned at 2:58 p.m. In 12 hours between, the world changed forever. Wars would never be the same. International relations would be defined by nuclear deterrence. The specter of atomic annihilation would haunt humanity for generations. Whether that mission was heroic or horrific, necessary or criminal, remains debated. But impact is undeniable. On August 6, 1945, Colonel Paul Tibbets flew an impossible mission ending the war in a single day. He carried a weapon killing 80,000 instantly and saving, by his reckoning and many historians, hundreds of thousands more by making invasion unnecessary. The flash over Hiroshima wasn't just 1.4 pounds of uranium undergoing fission. It was the announcement that warfare had entered a new era, that technology created weapons threatening civilization itself, and that the same innovation winning World War II had created tools that could destroy humanity. Colonel Paul Tibbets never apologized. He never expressed regret. He defended the decision until death at age 92. Whether he was right to feel no guilt or whether that represents moral blindness depends on perspectives shaped by circumstances none can fully imagine. Lives saved versus destroyed, duty versus consequence, and the impossible question of what we would have done in his position. What we know with certainty: on August 6, 1945, one pilot flew one mission ending the most destructive war in human history. In 6 hours and 15 minutes, the world changed forever. And the aircraft that changed it, a silver B-29 named after a pilot's mother, sits in a museum today, reminding us that history's most important military missions are sometimes flown not by the bravest or most skilled, but by those willing to carry the unbearable weight of history's most difficult decisions.